And not every church, but as a whole, let's maybe drop the ball a little bit on explaining or training up the congregations on why we're Christians. I mean, that's two questions that a lot of Christians can't answer: is why are you a Christian? Number one, and then number two, what does that mean? It's got to mean something. It's not a fraternity. It means something. It's a worldview. It's an ideology. You look at the world through the lens of a biblical heavenly worldview, and so that's got to play out to mean something when we're talking about all topics, whether they're current event topics, whether they're past topics, whether they're present in the media, not in the media, whatever it is. We look at everything. At least we try to the best of our ability, look at it through a biblical lens, through a heavenly lens, and translates hopefully to pleasing the Lord versus humans and men. All that to say is Jeff's back. You were gone for how many weeks? How many weeks were you gone?
3.
Felt like 3
21
years.
days.
It's Jeff.
Yeah.
Tyler was here. Tyler did
is
one.
here.
We got the whole crew back. Feels
Tyler.
good.
All 6'5" of them.
Yeah, I know.
That's a neat shirt.
6'5",
I like that shirt.
178 pounds.
I like that. Where's it from?
Feeling very relaxed tonight.
Yeah, very islandy.
I got
The
it
Hawaii?
I got it in Florida. But
your-
thank you for asking.
Oh, well, we should be praying for Florida.
When
by the way,
Florida
right? I mean,
wasn't
Florida,
flooded, that is correct.
Yeah.
Now,
that's
not
right.
the whole state flooded. I mean, a good
point-
portions of it.
So-
Significant portions.
Over
of
2
the
million
southern-
people without
southern
your
regions
parents are there.
Fort
Yep.
Myers is
Are
underwater.
they okay?
They're in Apollo Beach.
Okay.
They are okay.
Good.
The only thing that got damaged is some of the
Where's your mic?
shingles. The shingles on the house. Other than that, they had shutters on everything. They were fine.
Good.
Where they're living right now, it's almost as if it's completely fine, but obviously it's the surrounding areas that are
We have
pretty
relatives in
nasty.
Jupiter, which is not too far away.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what they said. Yeah, that side
We're
of
going to
Florida-
talk about this on Saturday,
Yep.
but
We
I mean, the
should be praying for them.
politicization of this already is it's irritating. It's ridiculous. I mean, we'll talk about that on Sidebar. Those of you that know, there's a podcast, a radio podcast that we do with Karen Klaus. Karen may be watching already, but on Saturday mornings
say it
on
like that?
WOI, I don't know why, on WOI, and so we'll be doing that. We do more current events, of course, with a biblical kind of overtone of just a kind of a biblical overtone. But we handle current events and legal events, and we're going to be talking about a little bit.
Yeah, we're not
about
a
this
theology program.
No.
We don't confine ourselves, and we'll deal with theology, but we want to talk about how does the stuff we believe in actually apply to the culture.
Yeah. Well, so there you go. So today we're going to talk about
the plan.
real life stuff. Look, there was a report that came out or a story that came out. George sent it to me. I saw it on a little blurb, but I didn't pay attention at the time. It was not a pastor. He's a pro-life activist, right?
That's right. He is
Catholic
He is a
denomination.
He's a sidewalk counselor. He runs a pro-life organization
Yeah.
called the King's Men, I think.
King's Men.
Yes. King's
What
Men.
state is this in?
I think so. I think that's correct.
Where's it in? It's up north somewhere, right?
It's in the East Coast. It's near Philadelphia, which is where this happened. His home is, I think, it's in Philly, because it was the Philly office of the FBI that responded to claims.
that's what it is.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to get into.
So it's basically, look, this is what happened. Look, the reality is this. I guess the topic is, I mean, is Christianity under attack? I mean, maybe all traditional values are under attack. We believe, at least. I think that's an objective statement. That's not a hyperbolic statement or sensitive statement. It's a factual statement. I think most people think that. The nuclear family is under attack. Traditional values are under attack. Biblical ideology is under attack. I think we know that. This is an example of it. So here's a situation where there were protesters. I call them prayer testers. A lot of these people were praying outside of these abortion clinics, right?
They
Protesting.
call themselves sidewalk counselors.
Okay, well,
And
that's
they,
fine.
And they take that literally. They're trying to counsel women who are contemplating an abortion that there are alternatives to that. How can their needs be met because they're legitimate needs, and yet still preserve the life of the baby? So, and they've been doing this for years. This organization's been doing it
Right.
forever. He runs the organization, and on occasion takes his 12-year-old son with him.
Correct.
Goes
But what they're
once
doing,
a week.
but they're not yelling at people, calling them names, or trying to counsel
not at all.
them. They're praying. Obviously, there's a group of them
Yes.
praying. So there was a volunteer, from what I gathered today, and I just caught up on the story today. At least I tried to. And if I'm inaccurate, someone correct me, so I can make a proper analysis. But so somebody volunteers at the abortion clinic, right? And then this person was yelling back at him, and all this other stuff, right? They were yelling back, and then actually crossed
a
over.
pro-abortion
person.
FBI calls him some sort of assistant or an assistant to the clinic or
Whatever.
patient.
It was a
patient
volunteer,
assistant.
from what I
Right.
understand. But they crossed over and was yelling in their face and you know, the normal
Yeah,
stuff.
it had been going on for a while.
Right.
And from the way the articles read, it wasn't confined to one occasion, Nico. It had been kind of escalating over time. But he's getting in his kid's face.
In the kid's face, the 12-year-old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so the
And
dad.
he's shouting obscenities about Pop.
Yeah. In the kid's face.
Yeah.
So,
And,
but-
and he's
but-
getting more and more aggressive and getting closer and closer. And the Pop says, "You don't have permission to talk to my son like that." Go ahead.
He still does.
Continues.
So the old man shoves the guy.
Yeah, right. So this guy's like in the kid's face, and he shoves him.
He
Not a
falls
small
down.
man. He shoves him. He falls down, and then
So police are called out. Police are called out. Nobody gets arrested. That's important. That's significant because
The charges are filed. Yeah.
Well, no. So tell me if I'm wrong. From my understanding is police is called out, and correct any point here because I'm not claiming to know all the details right now. Police are called out. No arrests are made at the scene. Right?
Correct.
So that means that the law enforcement officer that showed up at the scene did not believe there was probable cause, which is a low standard to arrest this.
and there were no injuries. Just to clarify.
Well, but there doesn't need to be injuries because all there needs to, at least in Texas, all there needs to be is pain. It could have been a Class C misdemeanor in Texas, an unwanted touch, or a touch that caused pain. And it doesn't mean there has to be an injury per se, a visible injury. But if you say, "Oh, I felt pain," well, then that's technically, and it's subjective. I get it, but I'm just telling you what the law says.
Sure.
But my point is that the law enforcement officer didn't make an arrest. So there wasn't probable cause according to law enforcement at the scene, no probable cause. So the case is turned over to the DA's office, or at least forwarded to the DA's office or the prosecutorial agency. They decide not to move forward. The state agency said, "We're not going forward on this bullshit." I mean, this is not.
It does go to a district court because the court threw it out.
Doesn't go to a court. It goes to the DA's office first, or county. Well, it doesn't go to the court. You got to be arrested first.
Okay.
A case won't, at least in Texas. If Pennsylvania is different, I'm saying so. If someone's arrested, they're arrested because of probable cause. They're taken down to the magistrate or jail. They see a magistrate. They make a bond. They come out. Now they have court cases. Now it's either assigned to a county court if it's a misdemeanor court, or a district court if it's a felony. That's the way it works here in Texas. Most states.
Obviously, I'm not going to contest that because you know what you're talking about. I'm just saying that according to this case, it did make its way into the court system and it was tossed.
See, I heard today. Okay, then that's something new. I heard that
Yeah.
the way I heard it is even stronger than that. The way I heard it was that the prosecutorial agency rejected it.
Yeah.
That they didn't. They decided not to. They decided not to prosecute. Now,
Well, you're being specific, and
I don't know.
I'm being general,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
I don't know.
Either
I don't
way,
know.
the outcome is the same.
Yeah.
That it died. It didn't have it didn't have a legal path
well,
forward.
the reason
and
why
they tossed it.
the reason why
fast forward.
the way I heard it today is even stronger is because if the DA's office or the county attorney, depending on the prosecutorial agency, or the state attorney, some states call it, doesn't even prosecute, it never gets to a court. Does that make sense?
Okay, well, of
so
course
if,
it does.
if it
Yeah,
gets to
it
a
does.
court, that means that a prosecutorial agency felt there was enough PC to move forward.
Well, that's interesting. I want to research just for my own education.
Please do.
Why
For
they're using
Saturday.
the word court in the articles. This originally was reported by Life Site News, and was picked up by secondary reporting.
I just don't
agencies.
know. I don't know a mechanism where the court would have had it that quick to kick it out. So
No, and I want to research it because
yeah,
I'd like
we'll
to learn
find out.
about it.
We'll have it ready for Saturday.
But bottom
But
line
the bottom
is,
line is that no state agency
died
picked it up.
regionally.
Yes.
Okay.
In the state court. But then the DOJ says, no.
like a year later, not like
Of
10
course.
minutes later, not
Yeah.
like a week later.
Well, no. And so what they do is they get 20 to 30 SWAT guys or whatever their equivalent of, and they go to this guy's house.
We were doing R-rated Christianity a week ago tonight, and at 7 a.m. the following day is when they conducted a raid. Yes, that's right. 30 federal agents out of the Philadelphia office, 7 o'clock in the
Instead
morning.
of a summons,
guns
instead of saying,
drawn,
"Come on,
which
man,
the FBI office is.
turn yourself
They're saying
in."
we didn't send a SWAT team over there, but they haven't denied that guns were drawn. So guns were drawn.
Where's your
They're
warrant?
banging on the door.
They had a
Mark
warrant,
Houck, Mark Houck is saying he's urging calm. He's like, I'm going to open the door, but he's urging calm. He's reminding him that there's children in the house. He's got 7 kids, and he's opening the door. And the way the wife explains it, it opens up to the staircase.
Yeah,
and you've
and
seen that.
push it open.
You got a foyer, opens up to the staircase, and it's wide open. So the kids are all at the top. She's standing on the steps, front row seat to all this.
Yep.
They come in, and I mean, they're shouting. They got guns pointing everywhere.
Insanity.
Right.
So
Gun pointing everywhere. And then she says, wait a minute. He's like, you're going to have to come with us. And she's like, you can't just kidnap somebody. Is there a warrant? And so they went out. Somebody went out to a car. They got the warrant. They brought it in. That's the warrant that I sent
The
you.
wife said that the mood shifted when they mentioned the warrant. Like that they were like really aggressive. And then all of a sudden when they mentioned the warrant, they were like, oh, Kind of like,
Yeah, but something else happened at that time. The kids were saying, "My dad's my best friend." You know, I mean, I think agents or people are probably wondering, "Remind me again why we're here?
Yeah.
Doing this? This guy's not a drug dealer.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
daddy.
Yeah.
For goodness sakes,
Yeah.
he's urging calm. He's acting calmly.
That's ridiculous, man. I mean,
see?
it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
Yep.
You know, this is the weaponization of the DOJ. Look, there's a lot of people that have an argument for dismantling the FBI, and people think that's ridiculous. But we have to think about the formulation of that organization, how it was formulated or not, whether there was actual statute that supports it, which would support a charter for it. So a lot of look, I'm not into that discussion. I haven't been part of that. I mean, I deal with that when we defend federal cases. When I was a district attorney, I worked with federal authorities on the border prosecution unit that we had, and so I don't have this blanket, bad opinion of all federal employees. I don't. I have hesitation against any government being too big, federal or state. I believe in a small government and a big city, a big citizen. But in this specific office, I am not going to generalize it to the whole nation. In this office, this to me seems to be way over the top. I mean, not only in the charge, in the accusation, and for what was done. I mean, there's some very specific federal statute that I have not researched
It's
yet.
the FACE Act that they're charging him.
FACE, F-A-C-E?
FACE.
And what does it say?
It's the federal or freedom of access to clinical that's it. Freedom of access to clinic entrances.
Act.
Yeah, and you can't obstruct employees going in and out. You can't obstruct people going in to seek services. You can't do any of that kind of stuff.
But on
and so
its-
they're denying there's any obstruction going on.
The irony on its face, that seems like a false allegation. I mean, if they're across the street, which most protesters are usually across the street, and no one's being hindered going in, and this complainant, I won't call them a victim, this complainant crosses the street to yell obscenities, and then there's a defensive third person allegation, because if you're in the space of a 12-year-old and you're an adult and they're yelling, I mean, you could take that as a threat or yourself. So there's a self-defense issue, defensive third person.
I was
And
going to
then-
ask about that. Say
absolutely.
more about the defensive third person.
Well,
because I mean,
so-
I think most people can relate to the fact that if your kid is getting harassed, I think an inclination of a good parent is to kind of stand in a gap.
The distance is more important. So if someone's yelling at your kid, then you can yell at them back. So you have the reasonable belief of apparent danger, and is it imminent? That's the standard in Texas. We'll use that generalized use of force standard that applies to most states, maybe not in those exact words. And the reasonable belief of apparent danger, and is it imminent? Doesn't have to be actual danger, apparent danger. I can get into the details of that if you guys want. And is it imminent, meaning immediate? So if you can defend yourself with reasonable force, so if somebody yells at you, you can yell back, you can't punch them. If they yell at you and get closer to you, at some point they're in your space, you can take that closeness, that closing the gap, as a threat. Depending on what they're saying, their body language, how they're looking at you, all that can be a threat. And you have a right, in Texas at least, not to be a victim. Now, the bottom line is, can you prove it? Or can it be proven in a court of law? Doesn't mean you're not going to get charged. I'm just saying you have a defense. And so, but words are usually, you can respond with words. If somebody pushes you, you can't stab them. If somebody punches you, you can't shoot them, right?
You gotta
have
meet
to
force
the
with an equitable force.
With the appropriate equal or equal force. And so, if somebody kicks you, you can't run them over with a car, right? Now, if number of people, size matters, all that stuff, male versus female, yes, that matters, as it should, because men on a standard as a whole are stronger and more domineering and more dangerous than a woman in general. And so all that
Unless
matters.
you believe the circumstances are going to escalate to what you called apparent and imminent danger.
Right, but
so
it-
it can be shouting. But if you believe it's going to escalate, what do you do defensively?
If you're shouting and says, "Hey, I think you should effing die," and then they start reaching behind their back, well, then that's reasonable. Do you think they're going? So, but again, can that be established in a court of law?
Right.
The example, since you brought it up, I always say, let's say we're in a coffee shop, and somebody walks in a trench coat, and we're all sitting here, us four, and they say, everybody in this coffee shop needs to effing die, and they start reaching behind their back, behind their trench coat. George and I are going like, you think he's got a gun? I don't know. What do you think, Jeff? Tyler, what do you think? Can you see a gun? By that time, we're done. Action beats reaction. I mean, I could draw my weapon under those circumstances, I take the chance. I shoot. He passes away when they do the investigation. They see a journal behind his back that says all the reasons why everybody in that coffee shop should F and die. Well, now under those circumstances, is it reasonable to think somebody would walk into a coffee shop and shoot? In this day and age, it could be a church, it could be a movie theater, it could be a school. Yeah, it's reasonable. Was it apparent or actual danger? Well, were we in actual danger, Tyler?
No.
In my scenario, we were not. Were we in apparent danger? We were, right? I mean, it looked like everyone's like, oh shit, people started ducking. People dove down and yelled. And then I drew my weapon and shot. So we weren't in actual danger. It was apparent danger. And was it imminent? Yeah, it was immediate, right? I mean, if we didn't act, we were done. Now, same scenario. Same guy walks in, butt-ass naked. No trench coat, just naked. And comes in and says, everyone in this coffee shop needs to F and die, and reaches behind his back. Can I shoot him?
No.
No, why? Unless he's pulling a bomb out of his ass. I mean, and I think it's there, and there's proof it's there. There's nothing. He's
These
not.
days,
He's
anything,
naked.
anything's
You
possible.
can fit a lot.
But I understand what you're saying.
I have to give it.
He's fully exposed. You can't
I'm just
say he was
trying to give you-
concealing something.
That's right.
under normal
It's not reasonable to
circumstances.
think that he's going to pull a gun out of his
Right.
ass.
I got an intermediary
Yeah.
or intermediate example. There.
Okay.
So what if he's not? What if he doesn't pull out the Communist Manifesto, but it's Your Life in Pictures magazine, and just because of the circumstantial nature of him pulling that out, you think it's a weapon, even though there's.
Well, he might pull out a phone, but it looks like a weapon because it's dark.
Okay.
So
So
I mean,
it
and
can
I've
be
had
anything.
cases, I've
It
had
doesn't have
cases
anything.
like that.
It doesn't have anything hostile written on it. It can
No,
be
it doesn't have
literally
to be
anything.
anything. It could be your
Yeah.
phone.
Okay.
It could be a
you
phone.
Went,
I'm
you went
just-
through that detail. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't calling out that it had to have.
There's no way I would know what it's on written on it. I didn't even know it was a book. I thought it was a gun. I've had a case where we didn't prosecute because a man was told to stop. He had a warrant for felon in possession of a firearm and assault on a peace officer. Both. They knew it too. He was told to stop. He jumps out of the car, turns around, and he has a phone in his hand, and one of the officers shoots.
So allow me for being forgive me for being OCD on this, but when you in your first example, when he pulls out and he says, and on there is written all the reasons why everybody in this coffee shop should die. You took the time to mention that, so I thought you were adding
I'm
that
just
as
saying
to
after
a
the fact, we
prerequisite.
read that. No, because if you pull it out and you can tell it's a book, then you can't shoot.
Yeah.
You understand my point? I'm saying
if
that
it's
the,
a book
I'm
with a
saying-
gun inside?
I'm saying that the reaction, that the response was even before you realized it was a book.
Okay.
I just gave that ending.
Okay,
the way
got
is.
it. That makes
all
sense,
I'm all
'cause
I'm
I'm not gonna be
saying
able to
is
see
that
what's written on
that's so
there.
in this situation. I'm sorry for the legal analysis, but you brought that up, and I thought you wanted to talk about it.
It's important. I'm sure you guys are listening. You're probably wondering, if I was in that situation, what would I do? That's why we're going.
Well, look,
through
I
this.
mean, you got someone that. So look,
could be legal, what could not be
You can't
legal.
claim self-defense if you bring in the provocation. So you have to come to the table with clean hands. I can't walk up to Tyler and cuss him out. Walk up to him, throw a rock at his car, and then come up to him, and then Tyler tries to do something to me, and then I do something back to him, and I claim self-defense. I provoked the whole situation. You got to have clean hands. And so if they're on this side, praying and counseling and doing what they've done consistently for months, right? I mean, this is a regular event for them. And this kid comes this one time, and this Mama Luke crosses the street. I don't understand where they get that he's blocking the freedom of access to a clinic, whatever the entrance.
Yes.
I really need more facts. I mean, maybe you need to look. We can look this up before Saturday. I just think on its face, it's a shitty case.
No, those aren't. The response that's come back is that they deny all of that. They deny that they were doing anything of the sort, that they were simply there to offer counseling. He's a sidewalk counselor. Once a week, drives 2 hours. He goes to two different abortion clinics. He's there for a total of 6 to 8 hours. This is something he's done for a long time, routinely. And his organization also does other things too. They're not just pro-life counselors, but they also, I think, have as part of his ministry. It is a ministry. He's a devout Catholic. As part of the ministry, he does counseling for men who are struggling, I think, with pornography. So I mean, this is a guy who is behaving, conducting himself, doing stuff because his faith informs those convictions. And what is alarming, Nico, is that this is probably the latest egregious example of a weaponized Department of Justice against people of, you mentioned tradition. I think traditional norms is kind of code for, I think, for Christian norms, because Christian norms and Christian ethics have largely influenced the institutions of the United States. I think that's a historical fact. But there seems to be a significant escalation, Nico, of this politicization of the Justice Department to go after this administration's political opponents, or at least ideological opponents. This is
Ideological, yeah,
this
it's
is
an
ideological
this guy's not a-
fascism, man.
Yeah.
Right. And so a couple of things are interesting. Guys like Josh Hawley, Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Hawley, Chip Roy, Representative Chip Roy. There's a representative Congresswoman from Michigan named McClain, who's written a letter to the Department of Justice, 14 other congressmen, trying to call these guys out on the carpet and say, what's going on here, man? I mean, this is in Philadelphia, right? This is the Philadelphia office. But it's okay for 100 people to storm a Wawa in the last week, right? Absolutely pillage the Wawa. Guess how many arrests have been made by this FBI office? By anyone.
What about the?
Can you count to zero? There's been no
100%.
no repercussions 100%. For it. 100%. Don't get us started. There's truly a two-tier justice here.
Totally.
And all I'm saying is, people of faith, Christian organizations, churches,
Speak up. The bottom line.
are at the tip of the spear.
And
This is reprehensible, man. It is a constitutional right to express your religious convictions in the public square. That's right. And so, in a sense, the Department of Justice is out of control, in a big sense. But what's the church doing about it? I keep waiting for, because the American Conference of Catholic Bishops has come out and actually provided some data and pushed back on the Department of Justice and said, hey, wait a minute. Over the last year and a half, we've seen 167, they've documented 167 hate crimes committed against people of faith, Catholics in particular. They were referring to across 37 states. There's a culture of violence that's almost being recruited and created, and it's engaged directly against people of faith and houses of worship, pro-life organizations. There are abortion clinics that have been firebombed. Jane's Revenge is completely out of control. This is a radical left-wing group that has been, to say they harass people is an understatement. There's been arson, there's been vandalism, there's destruction of church property, there's been the defacement of gravestones. I mean, and on and on and on. Where's the Department of Justice? This guy, a year later, 7 o'clock in the morning in front of his kids. Wow. They treat him like freaking Al Capone. What the hell? That's absolutely ridiculous. So our question is, you don't think this can happen at any time to any given pastor? You don't think it can happen here? Really? And so I'm just getting us ready, prayerfully, but also informatively. What does the church do about this kind of stuff?
Well, they need to educate. Go ahead, Tyler.
I want to add that the FACE Act also includes like clinics and doctor clinics, but it also does include religious organizations. Interesting. So I'm kind of curious. Back in 1993, when Bill Clinton wrote this into law,
signed it into law.
Signed into law, I should say. I mean, what was going on back then that they had to do it for abortion clinics and churches at the same time? Interesting. That's kind of interesting. It seems real political from the get, anyways.
Yeah.
Did you want to make a point?
Well, I was gonna say, like,
question.
they're not even hiding like what side they're going after, because if they were trying to pretend to give the appearance of fairness, they'd be like, okay, we'll go after the ones that firebomb the abortion clinic, make it look like we're consistent, but they're not. They're just clearly going after one side, and they're
not even going after a group of people that are trying to intimidate Supreme Court justices. I mean, and I get that there's
Jane's Revenge.
The legal analysis on that on both sides for free speech, whatever. But there were cases pending. They knew that the rulings were close to being released, and then you have these people picketing and protesting outside the Supreme Court Justice's house, which led to an attempted assassination. I mean, it did.
I think the Holy Spirit stopped that person.
Whatever. I mean, the guy turned himself in,
yes.
right? I mean, he had some moment of clarity. But the point is, I mean, where was the outrage? I mean, this is where the church has to sift through all the political bullshit, speak truth, encourage the congregations to do that, and lead with courage. Because if you don't think the crocodile's coming to your front door, you're crazy. At some point. I mean, at some point.
Right.
I mean, look in
the
Houston here in
toothpaste.
Texas. I mean, the mayor at one point was asking for sermons to see exactly what you're preaching for. You're preaching what you're going to preach to
He
your
would never go after
congregation.
Joel Osteen. He would never go after someone who's not preaching anything that's controversial. He'd only go
fall
after
in line, of course.
Exactly.
But they take it a step further. Forget the Christian. ask the Islamic person what they believe. Ask them if they support LGBT
Well,
ideology.
you made a great point a long time ago that there's no such thing as Christian phobia. And I was listening to Joe Rogan today, his newest episode with Dave Smith, and he was actually said exactly what you've been saying.
Oh, interesting.
No such thing as Christian phobia. It's easy to attack Christians. It's okay.
Rogan
It's almost
was defending Christians for once.
yeah, for once.
Interesting.
Even though obviously he does.
I got it. Well, who knows? I mean, I'd love give me some. If anybody can give me 3 hours with Joe Rogan, give me 1 hour with
You
him.
just have to convince him on the slavery thing.
Well,
That's his big shtick.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
He's not. But we'll talk
just
about
have
that
to
later.
convince him on
But the point is, but it's true. So no one's ever been called a Christian phobe, is what I normally say, or a Jesus phobe. It's always a one-side phobia. What's a phobia? Let's dissect it, because a friend of ours, young man Raul, made a comment about an LGBT post, and someone said, "This is homophobic. This is hurtful. This is harmful." I said, "Well, those are 3 allegations. Let's break them up separately." A phobia. What's a phobia? An unreasonable fear of something. So if I see, if George says, "Hey, Nico, look at that spider on the wall over there across the garage," and I draw my gun and I start shooting at it because I go ape shit and I freak out, well, that's an unreasonable fear of a stupid-ass spider 25 feet away. That'd be ridiculous. Right. That's arachnophobia. That's an unreasonable fear of spiders. So it's ridiculous. So when someone uses the word, we overuse the word homophobia, that means the allegation is you have an unreasonable fear of the homosexual lifestyle. Well, no, just because you disagree with something doesn't mean you have a phobia of it. You just disagree. I mean, that's just period. Like, again, now, no one has a Christian phobia. No one has a Jesus phobia. No one has a biblical phobia. It's always, I don't, and there's some passionate, vile disagreements on the Judeo-Christian ideology. But the insults and the labeling only come one way. Is that part of the church's fault? Not to argue in the way they argue, but just to stand up. And that's why.
But that doesn't, that is an America that we're seeing dying almost on a weekly basis. At the highest levels of government, September 1st, the President of the United States in Philadelphia. What's up with Philly these days? Because that's where I'm originally from, west of Philly. It's crazy, man.
Philly.
I mean, I worked in Independence Mall for a year.
The whole place went to shit after you left, George.
Right. Thanks for that. Appreciate the credit.
George's fault.
Yeah, right. So, but that was 1993. Okay. So can we dissect that for a moment there? I don't even know what I was going to say anymore. But you've got a September 1st speech by President Biden in Independence Mall. He's flanked by Marines. He's got a blood red backdrop. Okay. And the entire speech is about how his political opponents are a threat, a fundamental threat to democracy in America. Those are the words, right? In the aftermath of that, you've got the press secretary using clear and present danger terminology.
But I think your point is, George, Christians are lumped in there.
No, let me.
Okay, keep going. Okay, I just wanna
he
make sure.
defines that.
Yeah.
So he calls out MAGA Republicans for being, and I'll be nice, a destabilizing force in American culture, right? That's the nice way of saying what he said. What he actually said is that they're threats. They're threats to the country. Now think about that for a moment. He goes on to give a list of the kinds of practices these individuals engage in. And among those is anybody who wants to restrict or anyone who's interested in regulating abortion. Now, who would be interested in regulating abortion? Who would be interested, and why, right? Who would be interested in doing that? Well, obviously, these would be pro-life organizations, the overwhelming number of which are faith-based organizations and Christians. So this isn't an accident. Since September 1st, what have we, it seems to me, if you look at guys like, what's his name? Eric Bruskin, I think is his name, Bruskin. Eric Bruskin is an assistant director in the Department of Justice. I think he's in the commercial crimes division. And he called out the Alliance Defending Freedom, which is a 30-year organization. Next year it'll be 30 years. They're a legal advocacy group, Nico, on issues of religious liberty and First Amendment. He calls them out as a hate group. The Alliance Defending Freedom. They've been presenting before representing before the Supreme Court. They've won 14 Supreme Court cases. This is a reputable, well-established legal advocacy group that has done a lot of good. A hate group? All I'm saying is,
look, but we've created our own problems.
what happened to Mark Kalk is not an isolated event.
No, but but the church has for years now been forced into a corner of silence because they're afraid, because the church somewhere down the road got addicted to being liked over being credible. And I've said that for years. I mean, but I think it's more relevant now than ever. And I'm hoping some of these churches are waking up to see this. I mean, to be called a hate group, what does that mean? So you disagree with somebody, you have to hate them. You call them a name, people shut up because they don't want to be labeled something. But the labeling only happens one way, and the church doesn't stand back. Look, this is nothing different. We can go through Scripture and look at the apostles, the prophets, Christ himself, the shit they went through, and how they were labeled and how they were treated, and the hypocrisy. I've said this. We have said this for a while now. I really believe we're in a season of Isaiah 5:20. We just are. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil.
Yes.
Who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet
that's
for
right.
bitter, night for day and day for night. Whoa. I mean, it's a warning. Isaiah said, I warn you. We're there now. I mean, when you're saying, I mean, people that are fighting for life are hate groups and this, and we're changing definitions. Definitions matter. A man is a woman is a man. We don't know what this. We're indoctrinating kids on sexuality. We've talked about that on the show many times before. So a teacher can't say, hey, Johnny, I'm going to pray for you. Or a coach can't say, hey, if you guys want to pray after the game, come on, meet me in the court.
Because what happens?
But then on the flip side of that, in Austin here in Texas, you can get a bunch of third graders up out of their seat during Pride Month and make them march around in celebration. You talk about forcing something on somebody. How about don't do any of that stuff?
Right. So, but parents show up at parent-teacher conferences and parent meetings, and they're deemed domestic terrorists by the same Department of Justice that assaults Mark Houck's house at 7:00 in the morning in front of his kids. So, it seems to me there's a double standard here. And I'm just asking, how long do you think, if this continues, how long do you think it'll be before it starts happening at local churches? Now, you may ask yourself, well, because we're always saying the church is pretty silent about this. So why would the government go after a church if the church is doing nothing, is not pushing back? You're right. I think churches that are pushing back, churches that offer resistance, pastors that do speak up, that explain the theology and the philosophy and actually get into the Constitution, you know what I mean? I think you can expect to see a lot of pushback from the government on this.
Nico just mentioned Isaiah 5:20, the woe to those who call evil good and good evil. I think the one that's really poignant to me is in Matthew 24, as lawlessness increases, the love of many will grow cold. Brother will betray brother to death. I mean, the concept of even caring for another person, isn't even alive today. People are so self-centered, so in their own little world.
But yeah, it's more than that. I deal with young people for a living in the justice system as a prosecutor and as a defense attorney again now. I mean, our children are so, I don't even know how to say, I mean, I want to use a different word, effing lost. I mean, they're so demoralized. I mean, they don't even understand parameters. They don't understand. Literally, all the kids have their hunchback, from being bent over in their phone, and the crap that they're watching and looking at and being exposed to. And I think about our day, we didn't have shit to look at. I mean, don't get me wrong, you would have given a bunch of kids those times an opportunity to look at something inappropriate. They would have done the same. We didn't have the opportunity. There was restraint. We didn't have the technology at the time, but it was a different mindset. And there's studies on this. The kids' brains are being warped. The foundation, even if every kid in the world, in this country, went to a good Christian church once a week for an hour, what are you going to do the rest of the week? You got 23 hours on Sunday that left, or Saturday, depending on which day you go, and then 6 times 24 hours. I mean, I know you're sleeping some of it, but all I'm saying is they're being bombarded from Disney to Netflix to Hollywood to school now to politics to everything, and it's all it's all here.
That's right.
Available to them.
That's absolutely
They can access everything. There's no reason why a kid, I'm talking about until high school, should have internet on their phone. I mean, ours aren't going to have it. Ours don't have. None of our kids have our phone. Maya, she's turned 14 last week. She doesn't have a phone. She's not going to get a phone.
There's plenty of social research linking screen time to lessen cognitive function
100%.
and antisocial research.
Antisocial
and
because
conduct.
we don't know how to. I mean, you have people in the same damn room texting each other instead of talking. They don't even know how to. I mean,
parents can't be bothered, brother. Parents can't be bothered.
No, but I'm saying, but these kids. I'm sorry. I mean, just a fun thought. I mean, these kids. I mean, I deal with these kids. And that's why I love the martial arts training, because it's combat. You have to face somebody. You have to look in their eyes to fight them. I mean, these kids are like this. They don't know how to look at you. They don't know how to shake your hand. They don't know their posture. They don't know their manners. They don't stand up for a woman. I mean, if I count one more dumb dick guy that walks in front of a girl and doesn't open the door for her, I'm gonna shit myself. It drives me insane. I was eating the other day with Russell, And I said, look at this other dickhead. I mean, look at this guy. And I'm doing this, and don't even care.
Yeah, we
They don't even
we
open
told you it
doors
was
for
raw.
women. I don't care. I mean, we don't open doors for women anymore.
I understand
No
that.
respect
No,
at all.
but-
we have no sense of.
this behavior is
of cordial-
taught.
Yeah,
It's taught.
or if it's not taught, you're left to your own device.
Well, right.
Do you know
So
what I'm
it's
saying?
both. So the American academic system, the American educational system endorses this kind of nonsense. It's all about you, sexual gratification from K1 all the way up, right? You hate your gender and they encourage it. So that's what a wonderful lesson. The teachers are no longer teachers, they're actually activists, and they're actually helping your child to hate themselves, right? And then to be skeptical of anyone who doesn't believe the way that they believe, right? Which is the status quo. So now they're suspicious and they're self-hating, right? And then they teach them that what mom and dad are teaching at home, if it happens to be Christian, is bigoted and stupid. And so now you have this multi-billion-dollar complex that is engaged in reversing whatever a child is learning at home. So now you're fragmenting the family unit. Boy,
Where's
that's
the church?
wonderful. This is
Where's
all
the
tax
ch-
subsidized.
where's the church?
We're paying for this nonsense.
Well, we're supposed to be the restrainer. I mean, we're supposed to be the ones like you guys were talking about with abortion and everything else. We're supposed to be the. I'm sorry. Go ahead, George.
But brother, again, I want to get back to Nico, and I want
Yeah.
to tell you what you were saying, because I don't want to forget this point. We're talking about the kids. We're talking about activists in schools. Fair enough. We're talking about a church that's asleep at the wheel. Fair enough. But parents are asleep at the wheel.
Yes.
I mean, we go to restaurants. I take my kids out, take my wife out. You know, we like to go out to eat together. And I watch people.
I watch people too.
I really do, because I mean, it tells me a lot about what's going on in the culture. And again, this is not isolated. I see whole families sit at tables, and everybody is on this effing thing. Everybody. You've got mom and dad sitting there, which you just said they can't possibly compete with this.
No.
And with 7 hours of school every day.
Well, then
So
and then you
think
let
when
the
they are
kid
together
take it
with their
upstairs,
kids,
and then you have kid unfettered access to it.
right?
What do you think's
Laptops in
going
the
to
room.
happen?
Are you out of your
I mean,
freaking mind?
laptops and phones in the
But
room.
they're
What do you
sitting
think they're
there around
looking
the
at?
table, and this is all they're doing. They're not even communicating. They can't. I mean, I talked to kids today, and they can't establish eye contact.
Yep.
Active listening is
stand
a
that shit,
joke,
man.
right? There's no like sort of focused processing of what's being said. So just establishing eye contact is a very simple way to say, look, I care. You're a human being. What you're saying, I may disagree with it, matters.
Yes.
You're taking the time to explain yourself. You matter, right? You're an image bearer, for goodness sakes, made in the image of God. I may disagree again with everything you say, but I'm going to take the time to listen. Kids can't do that. They can barely construct English sentences. They
But they're
talk
taught if you
like they're
disagree, you
texting.
hate.
They
You
talk in
hate.
effing acronyms.
Look, I mean, I saw a collage of videos. Didn't you and Raul do that for a little while? You went out and interviewed kids in colleges. Remember that? We should go back and do. Well, you don't have time now, but I mean, it would be interesting. I mean, they hate this country.
Yep.
I'm not proud to be an American. The fuck? What are you doing here? I mean, where do you want to go? Where are you gonna? I mean, look, this is not a great country anymore. Let's be honest about it. It's just the best out there. I mean, it's just not. I don't know if you think that what's going on today is great. My definition of great is not what's happening today. Doesn't mean we can't reach that again. It doesn't mean any of that stuff. I'm just saying, but it's the best out there. Do we want to fight to preserve it? The church,
it's the greatest,
should be
relatively speaking.
the church should be a preserving agent. Why do you think Jesus called us salt and light? George and I have talked about this before numerous times. Salt in his day was a preserving agent. It wasn't, yes, you can say it's flavor. What flavor do you bring? All that cute sermons out there.
Yeah, and spare us the bullshit about church, Jesus not having the culture in mind or not having politics in mind. All of politics is about the culture. You can't engage a culture unless you know what the hell's going on with political issues.
We've talked about it, yeah.
Right? Well, I mean, but I just want to point that out because people are saying, well, you're saying the church and the culture. We have every responsibility to engage the culture on the issues that are perplexing the culture. What good does it do for me to talk to the culture about stuff that they don't care about or stuff they don't understand? I'm not going to talk in church lingo. What the hell am I going to talk to the culture about if I'm not engaging with them about the issues that are tearing the culture apart?
The most political statement, I think the most political statement is Matthew 28:19. Go to all nations, making disciples of all men, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded.
That is
George and I-
necessarily political.
That is political.
Yes.
But political meaning this. Listen, not partisan. It's political. We've talked about this for 3 weeks in a row or 4 weeks in a row. The word polity means a set of ideas advocated by a group of people. Politics. Polity. For the affairs of the city. That's Matthew 28:19. A set of ideas advocated by a group of people to influence the affairs of the city. That's political, not partisan. There was no Republican, Democrat. Back then they had the Herodians, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the Romans. I mean, they had the Sanhedrin. I mean, all these other different sects and groups, and it was all political. Trust me, Jesus waded through political bullshit his whole ministry. No doubt his whole life, most likely, but his whole ministry. So all I'm saying is a church should not look to try to be, to engage in politics, but it shouldn't avoid it either. Look, there's not an issue out there that's political to God. Every issue is just either sacred or not, period, end of
Well,
story.
I want to be clear. You're not saying that the church shouldn't be proactive.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, a church saying, this is going to be a church, we're actively going out there trying to be Republican or Democrat or this or that. That's not the church's responsibility. The church is supposed to be advocating for the
But it's
politics
okay for the
of
church
heaven.
to say we're going to speak up on matters of life.
Yeah.
I never said that. Yes, of
I'm
course.
just
You're saying
clarifying.
for them.
I'm only clarifying for
Absolutely.
them,
Yeah.
that's
Listen, and not saying you listen. I'm saying just careful. I mean, it's a shame that you have to clarify. These
I know.
things. But what
I
I'm
think
saying
it's
is,
important we do that.
for a church to say we're partisan, I get you're going to fall into one. You're going to fall into a group these days because they're so different. They're not even close anymore like it used to be. All I'm
And
saying
don't worry,
is,
somebody will put you in a group.
that's not the
Give 'em
objective
time.
of the church. The church is to advocate for the politics, set of ideas advocated for by a group of people to
Principles,
affect the
yes.
affairs of the city.
That's right.
That's So the church is supposed to advocate for the politics of heaven. We are called in 2 Corinthians 5, wait for it, ambassadors for Christ. Ambassadors for Christ. That's a political statement. An ambassador is what? Is visiting or living in or advocating in a foreign land. We're called foreigners here. And they're advocating for the home country. For the needs. That's what we're doing. We're not from this earth.
But
Scripture
as you
calls it
say,
that.
play it out. Play out Matthew 28:19 and 20. Play that out. Jesus says to evangelize and to teach the faith. Okay. And to make disciples.
students,
But those people that you're evangelizing, that you're teaching, that you're helping to make disciples by the grace of the Holy Spirit, they don't live in a vacuum. They're already disciples. They're disciples of
something.
Of
Yeah,
something.
that's right.
So in many cases, we have to unteach.
That's right.
Well, how the hell are you going to unteach anything? You know, they're usually, people are lost, as you said. They're lost. They're in bondage. I mean, if you're a believer, recall back to when you were not a believer and how lost you were, right? You were in bondage to sin, the scripture says, right? Now you've embraced the Holy Spirit. Praise the Lord. We used to be hostile to the things of God. Well, there is a worldview that competes every single day against biblical Christianity.
Sure.
And people are tied up in that. So we have to understand the nature of their bondage. We do. And all I'm saying is we have to be informed. We don't just go in there and start talking about Christology and hamartiology, the study of sin. We don't start just talking about, Trinitarianism. We got to engage them where they are and then walk across that swamp to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ by God's grace.
And-
all I'm saying is we got to be informed and we have to be proactive. And I think we're neither today. Go ahead.
No, everyone always quotes the "go into all the world," which I understand, but they always forget the part before it. This is all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore. So it's a command.
That's right.
And before that, Jesus is saying, "I'm in charge, so you don't have to be afraid. You got my."
Glad you said that.
You
It's
got my stamp of
Christ's
approval.
authority in us. Praise the
Yes.
Lord, not ours.
Let
right?
me
Christ's authority
mix
in
this.
us.
Let
Yeah.
me make a polity statement, right? Let me give you an idea by a group of people to influence the affairs of the city. The two most, and I've said this on both shows many times, more maybe on sidebar. The two most important phrases I would say in my professional, political, and personal life are two. In the beginning, God. That means He's the author of everything. He gets to decide how I do life. His opinions are my opinion. I believe I'm going to stand before Him. I believe He's the author of everything. And I'm going to stand before the Lord, the God of the Bible, to answer for it. Because that's the only thing we all have in common. Everybody has in common. Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, Shintoist, Taoist, you name it. Pantheistic, any of those worldviews, agnostic, atheist, any denomination of Christianity, it doesn't matter what worldview you're talking about. We're all leaving this earth at some point. What do you believe happens? I believe we're going to stand before the Bible, the God of the Bible, the only God, and this first century Jew named Jesus Christ. And then the second phrase is, we the people. That's it. We the people. Not even God forces Himself on us. God is not a socialist. He's not a communist. He believes in choice, free will. He loves us. He welcomes us. He wants to mature us like a true daddy does. A good daddy or mommy does not care about their kids' happiness. Well, maybe these days I'm going to bite my tongue, but they should not. They should care about their children's maturity. And so does our daddy. He cares about our maturity, and that means he uses pain, suffering, poor choices, good choices, affirmation, rebuke, encouragement, all of it together to mature someone so they can persevere through shitstorms and they come out stronger and better for it. That's our daddy. That's what he does. Those are the true, most important phrases. In the beginning, God, he gives me my definitions and my purpose, my mission, everything. And I look at the world through the lens he gave me, everything. I don't do it perfectly because I'm wrapped in this shit called flesh. And then we the people, meaning the bigger the government, the smaller the citizen. I believe in a big citizen. I do.
And the church is responsible for both of those, Nico.
Yeah.
The American church benefits from the protections and the wisdom, really, of the Constitution of the United States. Yeah. We really do. You can't benefit from those things and then be a shitty steward.
That's right.
And what does that mean? Well, if you're not actively engaging in educating parishioners on the blessing of living in a constitutional republic in an age like today, where constitutional freedoms are constantly under attack by our very own government, then I think you're remiss. I think you're failing the stewardship test miserably. And back to your first point, in the beginning, God, if you think that the majority of the church actually knows what that means, you're wrong. Yeah, I bet you right now that a lot of people wouldn't know where that is, because the biblical literacy in the average church is through the roof. They wouldn't know to say Genesis 1:1. They wouldn't know to say that. I'm sorry. That is the condition of the church
Well,
today.
whose fault is that? I mean, it's a leadership.
Well,
Not every church is the same way.
Look,
But I mean, you have pastors that are worried about being liked. No, I'm just saying. I mean, we've looked at the study before from Barna. And I don't know how many pastors. Maybe George knows. I'm sure he does. They said, how many pastors? Hey, how many think that the Bible has all the answers to societal problems today and all the problems of the present time? They said 90% of the pastors said the Bible has the answers. The biblical worldview, Jesus is the answer. Amazing. Now, how many of you teach it? About 10%. 10%. 10%.
Those numbers are pretty consistent.
They're consistent,
90%.
yes, but they're consistent with other data we've looked at,
Right.
from people that claim to be Christians to biblically minded Christians, through biblically minded millennials, through the expansion of that group called the nuns that we've talked about on the show before. I mean, it is very consistent, Tyler. You're right.
we've started kind of at the 35,000 foot level, where we see shifts in what they call affiliation levels. I no longer affiliate myself with the Christian worldview. And then what follows from that is a series of questions. Why is that? And man, you get a slew of responses. And what Nico and I have done in past seminars, we've aggregated those responses into categories. And the category that is like 3/4 of respondents is that the church is what? Answering questions nobody's asking. And critical questions about life and about meaning, about origins, about human exceptionalism,
Purpose,
science, yes, politics. The church runs from that, leaving a vacuum that is soon filled by what? Well, by secularism. And that's what we're seeing. Somebody's going to answer those questions.
That's right.
If it's not the pastor, if it's not the elder, somebody, or if it's not an informed parent, somebody's going to answer those questions. And they're going to twist the minds of the average kid around. That's what we're seeing right now.
And what we say from day one of this show, whatever the church avoids, the enemy invades.
That's right. And our public schools have become indoctrination centers. That's what we've got going on today. I want to cite this, and then you were going to say something.
No, I'm good.
We mentioned it on Sidebar. I think it's an important point. I keep coming back to the 7 churches in Revelations chapter 2 and 3.
What, George? You're referencing Revelation.
I know.
How dare you?
I try not to go back beyond chapter 3 because I know you get excited.
Yeah.
About the three-eyed
You get
whatever.
it. Yeah, Jeff is an eschatology hound. So I'm not going to go past, I don't need to go past chapter 3, but you're very familiar with the 7 churches. Sure. Those are 7 literal churches. Jesus is speaking, by the way. John kind of takes it from there after chapter 3. But Jesus is speaking, and he's calling out 7 churches that in some way, shape, or form are flirting with their own version, except maybe with the exception of Philadelphia. That
Philadelphia's
was
the good
interesting.
one.
That was actually one.
The irony, right?
The good one.
So he's describing a certain flavor of apostasy.
Yep.
Which is a rejection of basic doctrine.
Yeah, that's what apostasy means.
Summarizing.
Second Thessalonians 2.
Oh, brother, and we can hang out in Thessalonians, First Thessalonians chapter 4 as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress. So do you. But the church of Sardis is fascinating to me. And I got to give Dr. Erwin Lutzer, who's a theologian and a scholar, credit for writing about this, because I think it's such a great point. And he points out that the Church of Sardis seems to have a lot of appropriate parallels to what we're seeing with the American church. I'm very careful about drawing parallels, as you know, from Old Testament geographies and Old Testament events, or even New Testament events, to the American church. But I think there are some important parallels. I think this is one of them. Jesus says this in Revelations chapter 2, Revelations chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. He says, "You have a reputation for being alive, but that's not true. You're dead." That's what he says. And he then says that he gives them advice. He says, you need to
Return.
Yeah, you need to reclaim,
Yep.
right, before it dies.
Yep.
You need to strengthen. You need to strengthen the very few things, I'm paraphrasing, the very few things that are working for you, that you're doing right. You need to strengthen those things before they too die. And because I'm looking at your works, and they're not, he uses the word complete, but the word complete there means pleasing. They're not pleasing to my Father.
Well, that's
And
interesting.
so
He says it there. You know
when
why?
you
'Cause-
go ahead.
No, but I'm just, because later on in that chapter, just a few verses down, he talks about lukewarm. I wish you were hot or cold, because you're
Laodicea.
lukewarm. He was talking to
Yeah,
Laodicea,
yeah,
yes,
right.
but I mean, because you're lukewarm, I'm going to throw your ass up. You make me
See, everybody's
vomit.
he's picking his favorite church.
But see,
I'm gonna
I-
get back. I want to get
No, go back to
I'm
Sardis.
just kidding.
Go back.
I'm
No,
going
I'm
back
not
to
my
Sardis.
favorite church. I like the
I'm
statement.
teasing.
Jesus calling their ass out.
Which is, he does
Give a
do
shit
that.
about the church.
If you look at verse 4, I think it's really interesting. It offers some hope. And this is what I hope you guys who are hearing or involved in your church, I would ask that you would prayerfully consider verse 4 in Revelations 3. He says that there is a remnant among you. There is a group among you that are not drinking the Kool-Aid. Okay? And there's hope there. Go a different way. Become informed. Become proactive. Insert
that.
yourself in your kids' education. Become more proactive in what your church is actually doing in the culture. Encourage your pastor, encourage your board of elders who are really responsible for teaching doctrine, your overseers. Encourage them to teach doctrine, to teach the core teachings of the church. Become part of the solution. You become learned. Go to excellent centers of excellence that have certificates. You don't need to go get a college degree, but certificates. Go to biola.edu. Biola University has a wonderful certificate program. And there's a variety of them that you can choose from that you think might better equip you. The point is, become informed, engage your leaders, right? And then actually work together to see, speaking of the body politic, how you might engage your culture so that you can become part of that hope that I think Jesus is encouraging the Church of Sardis to become
You
part
brought
of.
up Revelations 3:4. And I want to make sure that this is correct. Yet you have a few people in Sardis, just a few, who have not soiled their clothes. Does that mean shit their pants? They're not so scared shitless that they're not piss themselves, right? They will. Is that what you were saying? That's what you're gonna say? That's you? You shit your pants? What are you talking about? Oh, you laughing? You wanted to say that too?
The other way around.
What is that? I mean, are they talking specifically
Okay, I try to
about that?
stick to drink the Kool-Aid.
No, I want to know what that is. I mean, is that what they're saying? Is he calling out? There's a couple of you that haven't cracked yourself.
No,
or
no,
what?
I think yes, that's right. But
Okay,
but
have some courage.
With what though? The church at Sardis had become very friendly
Okay.
with the culture around them, and so Lutzer brings up, to your point, to illustrate it. He brings up that if you go to Sardis today, you're going to see a shit ton of ruins, really from about 2 to 3 centuries after the 2nd to 3rd century. And it's just riddled with ruins. But he says standing very obviously, very starkly in the midst of those ruins is the same ruins of a Christian church. And it occurred to him that the church had become very friendly, very warm with a world, a mindset of sin. And so he posits, because I think it's historically grounded, that the very individuals who were at the Church of Sardis didn't see any problem stepping out after church service and going over to the pagan temple next door. And that's what he says. These are pagan temple ruins. They're right there. And so the proximity and the lack of pushback and this is the soiled your garments. This is the point. This is called what we call syncretism. The idea of mixing Christian doctrine with secular doctrine
Okay.
to make it more
Well,
palatable.
that sounds like
Right?
the story of Lot, right?
And
And his daughters.
the conscience seems
Right?
to
Being
be
so. I mean, think about Lot and his daughters. I mean, what got in their mind to think that they could get their daddy drunk?
As much as I would love to talk about Genesis 18 and
But
19.
do you understand my point? It's because
Right.
they got so entwined.
Yeah.
Remember, we're supposed to be in the world, but not of the world.
No, that's
so.
right.
So the question
And his
boils
wife
down to
looks back.
But the question boils down
having a
to:
love affair with-
are we setting the culture or reflecting the culture? We're called to set it, and you can't do it without boldness, without practicality, authenticity, and consistency. You got to know what you believe first.
Brother, why the silence from the church? It's got to be one of two things. Either the church is scared shitless.
that's
I
for
think
sure.
I think that's definitely it. Part of it.
Yep.
But the other part is agreement.
yeah.
Why would they make a noise if they're in agreement?
So you're saying they don't even know what they believe then?
I would say
distorted
that we
in
have
their thinking.
adopted, like we've said in here before, we've adopted a foreign gospel. We've soiled
Yep.
our garments.
I agree.
And after a while, like any pile of shit, if you're around it long enough, it doesn't smell like shit anymore.
That's a good point.
Actually smells pretty good.
That's a good point.
Because it's familiar. That's
Yep.
why. It's just familiar. And I think that we're flirting with that. We're behaving like that. We're focused on living our best life now. Right? This is a selfie generation. It's all about me. Jesus isn't converting people in church today. The American church. I think he's doing amazing things internationally. We'll get into that some other time. In
Revival.
other words, places where people are suffering, Nico, deeply. There's a lot of wonderful things happening in the American church. There's a lot of not wonderful things happening in the American church. And I think, frankly, the latter is worse
Well,
than the
the
former.
bottom line is this: speaking up, we got to start teaching people. Encourage your pastors to be bold, to be courageous, to train up their
Lovingly.
congregation.
Don't
But
get
if-
it. Don't
Oh, yeah,
get
yeah,
don't
don't
get
be
in
an
their
asshole.
face. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I
don't
know
be
you're
an
not
asshole.
suggesting
Yeah,
that.
no, no,
Be,
no, I'm
be
just saying-
gracious
Yeah,
and
of
be
course.
informed. Don't just make noise. Make informed noise, right? Lovingly and graciously. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. Did you want to say one last thing? I'm gonna wrap up.
No, I was just gonna say in response to the church, 7 churches. I know that
Holy shit! What are you gonna do about now?
Dude, this brother loves us.
Holy
Go ahead,
crap.
please.
someone's gonna be like, "Oh, George, are you saying that the American church is this?" I think you're being accurate. You're not. You're still reading it as it is. That it is 7 literal churches in a historic.
I want to be
time
clear about
frame.
that. They are 7 literally
Right.
historical churches.
Right.
But there are patterns of behavior.
Correct.
There are mindsets that parallel perfectly, I think, with some of the issues that perplex
And
us
I
today.
I agree with you. The only difference I have is that I do think the mindset of the Laodicea church is more similar to America because I do believe the American church has fallen to the great apostasy where we have completely compromised on everything. We won't take a stance on anything. We won't stand our ground on anything. We just bow down and just
I don't
But
think.
keep in mind, we got to be careful because this is the danger of kind of putting.
I was gonna
And I'm not
say.
suggesting that. I'm not trying to put the American church singularly.
one.
in
I know,
one.
I know you're not.
What I'm
I know.
saying is
I'm
that
saying the
one
similarities.
shitty behavior begets another.
Yeah.
And so you're just simply describing another problem that began somewhere. And so I think it begins with feeling comfortable. There was a book written years ago called The Comfortable Pew.
so it starts with the TARDIS mentality and
Yeah.
ends in Laodicea mentality.
That's
you
what
get
I'm-
to that
Then
point.
have
That's
to
what
be
I'm
one
arguing.
or the other.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
And I think when you feel really comfortable with it, and you start, and never underestimate a human being's ability to rationalize stupidity. We're very good at that. We're very good at rationalizing behaviors that we're comfortable with. We tend to nurture our sin, right? Because
Thomas Sowell says something similar to that.
he does.
It's true.
And so I think that's where it starts. We start, no, that's not so bad. I mean, everybody does it. And that's the other problem. Everybody does it problem. And we are, and have we ever been more in love with comparisons than we are today? I mean, that's really what the likes on social media is all
We're
about.
addicted to being comfort.
Who's
Being
liking
comfortable.
you?
When-
We've built an identity around
Well,
being
that's what I'm
liked.
saying. We're addicted to being liked. We're addicted
Correct.
to comfort, and there's nothing about that in the church. I'm not saying you go around trying to be disliked.
Analytics, it's
I mean,
numbers.
you
it's
gotta be truthful. You have to be consistent, but ultimately obedient. It's about obedience. And if that obedience takes me into a shitstorm, so be it. If that obedience gives me a season of abundance, great. But ultimately, that obedience gets us pleasure from our daddy. I mean, ultimately, that's our goal. Ultimately,
That's right.
Scripture is very clear that everybody will be paid back for what they just do, good or bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean we're checking off the box. It doesn't
Yes.
mean that. Like any parent, you will reward, dare I say the word reward, we've talked about that before, obedience. It's about obedience and relationship. That's period, end of story. Your salvation is secure in Christ. Romans 10:9. Believe in your heart, you profess with your mouth. You don't have to walk around the mountain 10, 11, 20, 40 times. That's it. You don't have to check off the box and do anything else. But then once you have that relationship and that gift of salvation, your gratitude and the relationship with the Lord should play out in your behavior, your level of obedience to want to please our daddy. It's really simple. We do it in life every day. We're such hypocrites. We borrow from God to slap him in the face. And the atheist does it too, so does the Christian. And so ultimately, I think the church hopefully is waking up. I hope they're waking up. We're seeing I think certain churches are waking up. I hope it continues. When we talk about
I'm
our
hopeful.
Bible,
We're
hopeful.
people of hope. I mean, a lot of stuff we said over the last hour is pretty bleak, but we're very hopeful. I mean, we know who wins in the end. The Holy Spirit's alive and well, working in the lives of believers, doing amazing things, and I'm very, I mean, I'm genuinely excited about it. My deep concern is that we don't make it harder for him. That Nico and I always share about this. I hope that I don't have to suffer more than I should or more than I have to learn simple lessons, right? I mean, I don't want, yeah, exactly. I don't want to make mountains out of molehills. And I'm worried that the church is so apathetic and so anesthetized by the culture that we've lost our sensory capabilities,
Paul
right?
says-
We can't tell that we're slipping away because we become so friendly with the culture. Go ahead.
Paul says in 1 Timothy 4 that physical training is good for most things, but spiritual training in holiness, not being set above, but set apart, is good for all things. And that's what we need to do. I think we need to train up the church. The church apologetics, we believe, is key to be able to give an apologia. Paul did it all through his missionary trips, in Acts, and to the Greeks and to the Athenians and all that. We should be able to give an apologia. You're given apologia not just verbally, but mainly in your behavior, the way you live your life consistently. As one pastor said years ago, always preach the gospel and when necessary, use words, right? So Gypsy Smith said it best, are you the fifth gospel? You have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and then you. Is the Christian kind of living out and expressing the gospel that the best we know in our flesh, not perfectly, to other people that are watching you. They're reading the book of your life every single day. Are we doing that? Are we being persuasive with our behavior, backed up by our words, consistently, authentically, and then doing our best to continue to learn? We would not arrived. I'm not going to arrive on this side of heaven. I'm not going to stop training. I'm going to continue to learn all the way until the Lord calls me home. And the church needs to take that humble position and posture before a loving daddy that has love, has mercy, has grace, but also has wrath. Because that's love in itself too.
It occurs to me, we say that, we interchange between answer and defense, but always be ready to give an answer. But the more accurate word is defense, not answer, because the context is usually a hostile one, Nico. You're defending against some sort of assault. No, I'm not talking about physical assault, but an assault of ideas. And most of the references to that term, apologia, are in courts of law settings, or disputes. It's not like a kumbaya moment over tea and coffee. And so Jesus never expected that we have an easy ride here. I mean, he knew that we would be stepping into a hostile culture, and he wants informed disciples. He doesn't want idiots, right? And if you come to him an idiot, as I was, he doesn't want you to remain an idiot. And if you grow in Christ, you're not going to be an idiot very long, right? Because we're growing in understanding, we're growing in maturity, we're growing in compassion, but we're also growing in courage. I mean, who could possibly be more courageous than Jesus himself? And I want that to rub off on me. Well, So praise the Lord.
It's not going to happen.
Praise the
by
Lord for
accident.
Jesus. And it's not going to happen in 5 minutes. It takes time.
Pastors need to lead. Pastors need to take on the responsibility.
Yes, they
There's
do.
There's more expected of you. 1 Timothy talks about it. James talks about it. You sure you want this position? I think lovingly, pastors and their elder board should push them. I mean, just like the trainer pushes the champion, the Olympian. If they had their choice, maybe sometimes if they're self-motivated, they want that first place gold medal placing on the podium. But their trainers push them, their training team pushes them, and it's a synergistic effect to reach that goal. I don't think we have an Olympian mindset as followers of Jesus Christ, where the sacrifices are made. No one ever looked at the Olympian and said, man, what a dumbass for them giving up those weekends and all that cake and the drinking and the partying and the distractions and all the women and men and all the whatever it is. What a dumbass. And yeah, they got the gold, whatever. I mean, we don't look at it that way. So we feel like we're giving up something, and we don't understand what the prize is, what the podium will look like once we get to heaven. I think it's critical that we do that, guys. So I really appreciate you. We didn't look at this is gonna go 3 more hours.
No, bro, I'm
Holy
just saying
shit.
we started
I mean, between you two. I mean,
just a reminder, yes, to pray for what's going on in Florida right now. But just as a courtesy, we started this talking about Mark Houck and his family. We should be praying for that family.
Yeah.
He's been indicted, $350,000 fine. Facing imprisonment up to 10 years.
Hopefully
Let's hope this comes to
I
nothing.
hope a good lawyer donated their time. I hope so.
And we're gonna pray for his success here. But
Guys, thank you. I hope this was beneficial to you. Share that. Are you guys finished now? Tyler, you haven't been too quiet. You sure don't want to talk for 30 more minutes?
I can't get in.
Well,
No
it's
shit,
it's
man,
my
with these-
reunion. I can't have a moment.
This is your
Talk
last
about
week
the
here.
church
You're
at
done.
Ephesus. No, please go ahead.
Okay. All right, guys. Have a blessed week. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week. Thanks for joining us.